My name is Alexis Harris. I'm actually a professor at the University of Washington in the Department of Sociology. I graduated with my master's degree in 1999 from UCLA, and then my PhD in 2002 from the Department of Sociology here or there at at UCLA. Two caveats. One, as you can tell, I get extremely nervous when I talk about something so personal. There's nothing academic about my presentation here. It's just my story. And I do want to acknowledge that it is my story and my journey, and that people have very different experiences or have had very different experiences with being diagnosed with cancer and going through treatment. So this is just how I experienced my cancer diagnosis. So my life before cancer, this is me. I am first and foremost a mom and a wife. My kids were 5 and 8 at the time that I was diagnosed. Professor, I was hustling, teaching classes on the University of Washington campus. Would sometimes have fun trips with my sorority sisters of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, travel with my family. I was at the peak of my career. This is me speaking at the White House, right about 6 months before I was diagnosed with cancer. This was me with my book that came out about a week after I was diagnosed with cancer, and my daughter here. So this was my life. I was having a great time. And then on May 26, 2016, my nightmare began. I had a year of symptoms. And so my symptoms really began, I'm a gym groupie, and I love cycling, indoor cycling classes. And so I regularly did that. And we would do something called Tabatas, where you would go, hard, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, 20 seconds on, and you do back-to-back Tabatas. And at the second grouping of the Tabata, I started to experience breathlessness, like I was having an asthma attack. And so a whole year of these, or I went in, and that's the only reason I went in is because it was messing with my workouts. So my doctor took it very seriously, and I was fortunate. Did labs and noticed that my white blood counts were low, and said that she'd just monitor me. And there were a couple of times when, like one time she called me after labs and said, they're seriously low. Can you walk? And I'm like, yeah, I just worked out. It was just really weird. Another time when I had really bad bruising, but nobody thought that I should have a bone marrow biopsy. Finally, after, that was in April, and finally in about November, she sent me to a hematologist who did some testing and said, you might have cancer, but I'm not worried. I don't think you need a bone marrow biopsy, so we'll just watch you. And that scared me. At the time I was at a HMO and decided that it was open enrollment. And so I got insurance, which would allow me to go to University of Washington Med and Seattle Cancer Care. But I had to wait until January. So I waited. I had to be very aggressive in getting an appointment, because they wouldn't allow me to have an appointment because I hadn't been diagnosed with cancer. So I was aggressive. I got an appointment with a hematologist, and my husband and I went in and met with him, and he said the same thing. He even drew me a bell curve and said, you're not normal, like, to have cancer. And, particularly a blood cancer, it's usually white older men, and you'd have to be on either tails of the bell curve. And also Black women are just known to have low white blood cell counts. And so it was, if you could put your phone, your thing on mute, please. Thank you. So he said, we'll watch and wait you. Sorry, watch for a while. And then 3 months later, I had another blood test, and he said, you know what, let's finally go ahead and just do it. So it'd been a whole year. Let's finally go ahead and do a bone marrow biopsy. And he called me like 2 days later and said that you have, it looks like myelodysplastic syndrome, MDS, which is a form of leukemia. And it's serious and it's rare. I'm not quite sure, what the treatment will be. And then he called me back the next Monday, and already had an appointment for me to meet with an oncologist that Thursday. And she told my husband and I that I had 18 to 24 months to live without treatment, and that we needed to put it into remission right away. And so I did, they told me, put your life on hold for a year. So quickly. And so I had to do that with work and everything. And then a month later, I was inpatient chemo for a week at UW Med with Seattle Cancer Care to try and put it in remission. And we, in July, we did another bone marrow biopsy and it was in remission, but they told me it was going to come back and I needed a transplant right away. So knowing, not much, I don't do health disparities in terms of the sociology that I teach and do research on, but I knew that it was going to be hard to find a match. Um, my father was African American and Filipino, and my mom is white. And so these are the likelihood of finding a match if you're African American or, whatever category you're in. So 23% if you're African American, but I knew I had a much even lower likelihood of finding a match because of my mixed race ancestry. So I didn't have a match. My twin brother wasn't a match. We knew because we're fraternal that he just had a similar likelihood of matching like any other sibling, but we, for some reason, thought he was going to save my life and be the match. And so it was devastating when he wasn't the match. I found out I couldn't save myself. So when I was 20 at the University of Washington as a college student, I had signed up for Be the Match. And in the process of waiting to find out if I had a match, I got this email. And it said, "Dear Alexis, when you joined the National Marrow Donor Program's Be the Match Registry, you did so knowing that one day you may help save a life. You appeared as a possible marrow match for a patient considering a transplant." So the Be the Match Registry does double blind. They don't know who needs the match, and they match you with who's on the registry. So they matched me with myself. And so I had a very uncomfortable conversation with the young person from Be the Match who felt horrible that they had called me after this email to try and match for myself, because obviously I couldn't do that. I also was told that there were 2 potential donors, but they declined to move forward with further testing to see if they would be a match for me. So we were told that the best opportunity was to do a 6 out of 8 mismatch transplant. And so we were prepared to do that. My babies were young and that's all I could think about. And I just needed time. And I knew that with the 6 out of 8, I might not be extremely successful, but at least it would give me a little bit more time with them. And so we were willing to do that. So we actually went into Seattle Cancer Care with the intent of signing away to do that. But the doc that we met with, the transplant doc, was actually a PI on a clinical trial using donated umbilical cord blood. And he was very excited. He said, "I think this is the wave of the future." He gave me a embargoed article for JAMA that showed really equal likelihood of successful outcomes between umbilical cord blood and 10 out of 10 matches or 8 out of 8 matches. And so we said, what the heck, let's try this. And so then on September 21st, 2016, I had my transplant. This was probably the only moment of that day that I smiled. It was a hard day, as folks know how hard that is, where they break your body down. We tried to involve the kids as much as possible. Who knows how to do this with kids? But so they named, with cord blood, you have 2 bags donated. And one will take. And so we had Team Priscilla and Team John. That's what the kids wanted to name the bags. Team Priscilla engrafted after 17 days, which was rather quick from what I hear. I put up, I don't know if you now, hopefully you'll always think and smile when you hear the Earth, Wind, and Fire song. But the first line is, "Do you remember the 21st night of September?" And so I always put that up there because it makes me smile and try and be thankful for that day, because that day did save my life, and not remember kind of all the hard stuff that went with it. So right before I went into the hospital, I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. You don't know if it's going to be successful, what the the graft versus host disease might be. And so I had this strong urge that my cancer had to matter. If I didn't live, I needed it to make sense for my kids. This is where, whenever I talk about my kids, I get emotional. So all my friends wanted to do something. And so I had amazing friends, and we reached out to Be the Match. And we had 7 bone marrow registry events across the nation, 2 in Seattle. Houston, my funder for my research, they did one. I had worked again with the Department of Justice, Obama's Department of Justice, and the Assistant US Attorney General held one. We had one in New York and one in New Orleans, and we had several hundred people register, and we actually saved 2 lives. 2 people matched with the people that signed up at our events. And so that, again, that made my cancer matter. So regardless to this day, that made me feel good. And we also, when I came back to life after my 100 days post-transplant and started to go back to work, I had a good working relationship with the University of Washington's president. And I asked her, can we do something formal with Be the Match? And she was great. She said, let me talk to legal. And so she talked to legal and we worked it out. And we were then one of the first institutions to have a formal partnership with Be the Match, universities. And the goal was really to educate every alum, students, staff, faculty, our community about the opportunity to be superheroes and save lives. And so that's how I've gotten involved with Be the Match. I just like to kind of put up some stuff about reflecting back and forward, so it's not all a bad, hard story to tell. It's just one thing that I learned is that it's the importance of good health, that it's so important to know if I wasn't doing those Tabatas, I wouldn't have known that something was off. And the disease progression could have been even worse and made the transplant or the process of chemo even harder. Key was having faith and knowing that I am going to die at some day, but this was not at that moment going to kill me. I questioned it sometimes, to be honest, but my faith really was one thing that got me through. Trusting the process, trusting my docs, not questioning that what I needed to do to move forward, but being very, very compliant kept me out of the hospital several times. And reflecting back, like I said, as opportunity, but having cancer was an opportunity to face my mortality. And I pray that none of you on this call have that moment in your life. But it really forced me, the question that kept coming in my head was I good enough? And what did success mean? Was I a good enough mom? Was I a good enough daughter? Was I a good enough wife? Was I a good enough friend? So I do appreciate having cancer for that. I did feel good that I felt like I had done enough, and prioritize my kids and my family. But it was a moment to really check in with myself and to see if I was living my values and my principles and priorities. So one thing I always say now is grind, grit, grace is our family motto. We grind, we work hard, and we play hard. We're in the moment and present in that moment. When I'm with my kids, I'm with my kids. When I'm at work, I'm at work. But I also know this too shall pass. Hard times like COVID, hard times like cancer will pass. Grit, I learned a lot about character in this moment, and to have courage and resolve, and to make sure that I'm living by my principles and priorities. And then a key also is grace, is to work hard, but give myself grace in moments. I have some complications and hard moments, and to let myself have them and feel them and know that it will pass and that I have to push forward. But also giving grace to other people, because we never know what other people are going through. And especially in this moment of COVID, we don't know. So try to not judge and give people grace and protect that grace for yourself and for other people. And then just sort of concluding a couple things. And sometimes when you tell people you have cancer, they always want to know, well, what do I do if my father or my partner has cancer? And some things that stuck with me was I remember having a really bad day in the hospital, and I was texting with my line sister, my Sans, and she said, you'll look back and this will be a blip in your life story. And I was trying to say that I would call him BS on that, but it was true that these hard moments feel like they're never going to pass, but they do pass, and you become stronger for them. Another really good girlfriend said, you're strong. Everyone was saying, you're strong, you're going to get through this. But she said, you're strong, but when you aren't, it's okay, and I'm here. And I needed to hear that. I needed that grace so that I could move forward and be myself. And then I had another conversation with a friend, and I told her I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. And she said, we aren't those types of people. And that made me realize I get to choose who I want to be. Like every day, I can choose the type of character, the type of strength that I have, and I can choose to power through and be stronger. So just the final take homes is that, like COVID, I didn't, for cancer, didn't have the option of not facing a hard year and a half. Like I had to power through it and I had to figure out how I was going to get through it. We don't choose how we respond. There's a closet actually that I cried in often because my kids couldn't find me easily, and I could dry my tears in time before they got to me. But then there's also times when I realized I had to grind it out. Um, I think the hardest thing, reflecting back on my cancer experience, I remember the hardest day was in the hospital on my son's 5th birthday. And I had a conversation with God, and I said, this is the only thing I'm going to allow cancer to take from me is my son's 5th birthday. My husband brought him to the hospital, but he was so uncomfortable. He didn't want to be there. So I chose how I responded. I broke down that day. I said, God, this is the only thing cancer is going to take from me. And when I get out of this, I'm going to be the best person I can be. So that's what I focused on, is how can I come out stronger for my kids, physically, mentally, spiritually, and as a person. And I have chronic medical issues, but I'm alive and I'm so thankful for that. Thank you for letting me share my story and get emotional with it. I appreciate it and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much, Alexis, for being so vulnerable and being willing to share your story with us. And it's so, I mean, I've heard your story before, but it's so moving and inspiring to me, even as someone that works for Be the Match and works on this mission every single day. So thank you for sharing that. So now before we head to Q&As, which we definitely encourage all of our participants to submit any questions that they would like discussed by this amazing panel of individuals that I'm about to introduce, submit those in the chat and we'll be happy to address those. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce the rest of our panelists tonight. So we have Dr. Indira Gillespie. She's been on the bone marrow registry since 1994. She completed her doctorate degree, summa cum laude, in education and organizational leadership from the University of the Pacific. And the focus of her doctoral research was entitled Increasing the Representation and Utilization of Blacks on the Bone Marrow Registry, a Needs Assessment. So her research was inspired by her experience as a 2-time bone marrow donor for 2 complete strangers. And the survival of her last recipient inspired her to start Angels in Disguise, whose mission is to conduct non-clinical research and increase awareness about the bone marrow registry and the critical need for Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans to join and donate bone marrow if they are matched. Next, we have Shakira Wesley, who's a colleague of mine. She is motivated by her experiences as a parent of 2 children battling sickle cell disease. Shakira works on a Be the Match initiative in Atlanta, which is designed specifically to address the inequity facing Black and African Americans in need of a transplant. We are also welcoming Mr. Dorian Price. Before he was diagnosed with blood cancer, he was planning an exciting year. He bought his first home. He was planning to travel around the world. And now his life has shifted and he's on a mission to find his match, as well as raising awareness for all the other patients who are in a similar situation and looking for that match to save their life. And then last but not least, we have Miss Camille Williams with us. She's a 22-year-old who was diagnosed with Diamond-Blackfan anemia in middle school. And she has spent years learning how to advocate for herself as a Black woman. And Camille is currently transfusion dependent and still searching for a match. So thank you all so very much for joining us. Corey, or do we have any questions in the chat that we want to start with, or should we start off with one of our questions here?
You're good to go to start off with some of the
Perfect.
questions you've got going.
Yeah. So we kind of wanted to start a little more broadly and just address, we talked about some of the disparities that Alexis faced on her journey, and we can touch on some of those that, all of you have faced as well. But just to start with the big picture, why do disparities in treatment and accessing a live donor exist? And other than joining the registry, which of course is essential, what else can we do to disrupt these disparities? Dr. Gillespie, would you like to start us off?
There, can you hear me?
There you are. Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that. So there's several reasons why there's a disparity in the Black community. And one is because we're underrepresented on the bone marrow registry. There are about 7% of Blacks on the bone marrow registry. However, we represent over 13% of the United States population. So there's that huge gap there. And then in addition to that, what I found out in my studies, the three main reasons why people that aren't on a registry, particularly Blacks, it's due to a lack of knowledge about the bone marrow registry. And if they have heard of it, they have heard of myths and things like that in regards to joining the registry or how bone marrow is harvested. And then there's a lack of motivation. A lot of people believe that their DNA will be utilized for reasons that they have not given permission. And so that hinders them from doing so. And I call this my KMC. So K, knowledge, M, motivation, and then C is cultural reasons. And the cultural reason isn't the typical ones like religion and things of that nature. It's a distrust of the medical community because Blacks have been used as guinea pigs in the United States for centuries to further or advance medicine. So that those things are huge hindrances that keep us off the bone marrow registry. And then the people that are on the registry, just as Dr. Harris said, you know, sometimes when there is a match, they don't go forward with it. And so a lot of times that's because they, the same thing, you know, you join the registry, you may not know a lot about it. However, once you become a match, it becomes real for them. And then all of that lack of information or lack of motivation or fear that their bone marrow or things will be used for other reasons, and that fear of and distrust of the medical community, it all becomes real to them. And then third, it's difficult for us to match with ourselves because our HLA genetic marker is so diverse. Sometimes, Dr. Mills had given this presentation once. I was on the Be the Match Bone African Diaspora Strategic Planning Committee aimed at getting more African Americans on the registry. And he had given a presentation and he stated that at that time, 7 million white people were on the registry, which garnered a 77% match rate. However, less than a million Blacks were on the registry. I think it was like 800,000. And that was getting us 23%. And most people would think, okay, well, if we get 7 million Blacks on the registry, at least our numbers would get up to 77%. And that's not so. Because our HLA genetic marker is so diverse, it will take 23 million Blacks to be on the registry. That's more than triple the numbers to get that same result of 77%. So that becomes an issue as well. And then also when you look at those numbers, if there is only about 46 million Blacks in America, and you only can join between 18 and 60, and if you have certain heart conditions and diabetes that's reliant on insulin injections and all these other health conditions and obesity and things of that nature, you can't join. So that kind of means that there's not enough Blacks in America to end this disparity. So one of the things that we have to do is open up the relationship like we have with Europe and a whole bunch of other bone marrow registries. We need to open up that relationship with the bone marrow registry in Cape Town as well as Nigeria. And we were told that the reason why we do not have those relationships, that's not two-way. We do have a one-way relationship where we can donate for them, but as vast as Africa is and plentiful of Blacks, they can't donate to us. And we were told, Dr. Mills said it was because their medical standards aren't up to par. And to me, that is just a poor excuse. Because if you go on grants.gov and you see all the billions of dollars America gives away as grants for other countries for infrastructure and things of that nature, why can't we give a grant to Nigeria and Cape Town so that they can build their bone marrow registry up to par, up to the same medical standards that's expected in the United States so that we can save more Black lives?
Thank you so much for highlighting all of that, Dr. Gillespie. it's so important, I think, for us to focus on that really big picture that you were discussing, and for us to be informed. You know, this panel is about activism and what can we do to make a difference, and even just having conversations and being aware of this so that we can advocate to get that type of funding or, you know, grants program. You know, all of that is a step in the right direction. And we did receive a question, a couple of questions here in the chat. One is, you know, do you think there's a correlation between donor reluctance among Blacks and the reluctance to take the COVID vaccine in regards to, you know, relating to distrust with healthcare?
I believe so. And there's a huge distrust. And then there's outside of just the normal distrust, people are questioning whether or not there's been enough testing. And I think that goes across the races. It's not just a Black question, because usually it takes drugs to get to market. It takes them several years. And because this was sped through, a lot of people have the conception that it's not as safe as other drugs and other vaccines and things that had to go through a different approval process.
Yeah. And so, you know, we talked a little bit about that big picture, and I'd like to ask Camille and Dorian, in terms of, you know, both of you are searching for your match. Camille, you've been, you know, actively involved with Be the Match for quite a long time and searching for your match for a while. And, you know, when we bring it down to what can we do as individuals, and what that experience is like of you guys having conversations with other, you know, young people in terms of joining the registry and misconceptions that you address regularly, what is your experience of that like? And, you know, what do you see as some of those actions that we can take as individuals?
Okay, I guess I'll go. So I'm a college student. Hi guys, my name's Camille. I'm 22 here in Houston, Texas. I'm currently at Houston Baptist University. And I've done quite a few bone marrow like registry drives within my church, within my school. I just did one a couple weeks back at Houston Baptist University. And for me, like I tell everyone I know about my experience, like within my like health and my illness and everything. And the feedback that I'm getting, like everyone's super proud of me and, you know, you're so strong and this, that, and the third, but there's still reluctance to like join the registry. And I think it's due to like lack of education and not understanding what it is. And I'm in the School of Business. So I try to explain to the best of my ability, you know, the medical side and what the registry does and, you know, all the different benefits that it has. But I can only do so much. So I don't have all the statistics and I'm still learning here. But for me, I think it's they don't understand, they don't have the knowledge, and I guess they're just afraid. Like they mentioned earlier, some people, you know, they'll join the registry and then if they get the call, then it becomes a real to them. And they're like, oh, like maybe I don't want to do this, or, you know, they may be afraid that it might hinder them in some way, or, you know, they might get sick through the donation process, and things of that nature. But for me, I basically just do what I can, go on as many Be the Match events that I can, talk about my story, do as many registry drives that I can, and then just kind of go from there.
Thanks, Camille. And Dorian, can you talk a little bit about your experience?
Yes. Good evening. Hello, everyone. I'm Dorian Price, 33-year-old Black man, as you all see, from New Orleans. I reside in Houston. And in my experience so far, education is one of the biggest things, especially when you're referring to someone being a donor. A lot of people associate donor with surgery. So actually taking the time to explain to them that this process of becoming a donor does not require any surgery. It's pretty much the same as giving blood or plasma. That's important to break it down to those simple things so that they can understand and they can eliminate that fear that they have, because no one wants to take anesthesia, no one wants to get cut on. And I completely understand it, having gone through and experienced some of those things. However, when you break it down and you explain to them that it's just something as simple as that, and you can actually give someone a second chance to live, that's when it becomes more easily done for, like they'll be more encouraged and motivated to do it. Now it still isn't easy, and it's hard to do, especially when you don't have a pulpit to stand on and educate people from the mountaintops. But I've done what I can, and I will continue to do what I can to raise awareness for donors, not just for myself, but for others. Because I know there are tons of people in my situation who don't have this opportunity that I have right now to speak, to raise awareness, to bring light to the situation. So as loud as I can be, as active as I can be, I'm going to do it because I know that this stems far beyond my situation.
Thank you, Dorian. And Shakira, we had a couple of other questions that came through. If you can talk a little bit more about this, they were asking, what's the difference in terms of these HLA markers, and why does being diverse matter, and how can we be involved? How can we be actively involved in addressing these disparities?
Yeah, so really quickly, I kind of want to piggyback off of what Doreen and Camille were saying. Hi, everyone. Yeah. But I also think that one of the things that we're missing a lot of times is we're not aware of all the diseases that can be cured from a bone marrow transplant. There are over 70 different diseases that can be cured from having a bone marrow transplant. And I know personally, with having 2 children with sickle cell, it wasn't the doctors that told me that my children could be cured from sickle cell. It was me finding out on my own. For whatever reason, whether it be, sometimes they assume we can't afford it because it is the recipients who would be paying for it, whether it's that, or they just think you're not going to do it or whatever. They don't always tell you that it's a cure. And so what I have found in the sickle cell community is a lot of people have no idea that a cure even exists. And so if you have a loved one who is suffering from something and they've been suffering from it for years and you never know there's a cure, then you wouldn't even get on the registry in the first place. So I do think that there's a lack of understanding and a lack of knowledge on the types of diseases that can also be cured, especially diseases that affect the Black community heavily. As far as HLA typing, I'll just piggyback off of what Dr. Gillespie was saying with it being so diverse. That's why it's a lot harder to find your match. So, it's not as simple as your blood type. It's a genetic code, it's your genetic makeup. So you're more likely to have someone, 90% of matches come from the same ethnicity rate. So you need to have someone of the same ethnicity rate in order to find your match. But because Black people's HLA is so unique, it's harder to find the match. So we have to get as many people as we possibly can on the registry so that they understand, you could be someone's match. I've been on the registry since I was an undergrad, which I'm not going to tell my whole age, but it was over 10 years ago. And I have yet to get a call. So you can be on the registry for years and years and years and not get the call because it's just so, our HLA is so unique. Yeah.
Yeah, and something that you said there, Shakira, really, I think links back to Dr. Harris's experience, which is she happened to find this clinical trial that saved her life, right? Yeah. And so, Dr. Harris, when and all of you, when we talk about, exactly to your point, we can all be on the registry, and that's the first step. But then what do we do after that? And how do we deal with things like, maybe not knowing all the diseases that a transplant can cure, or, lucking out, right? Getting lucky to get into this clinical trial, which is crazy. How do we address those things? And Dr. Harris, you're on mute, but if you want to come off and talk about that.
Yeah, no, it's all about education, and it shouldn't be on us to learn. I mean, when we're in that moment and we're suffering and we're scared and full of pain, we shouldn't have to start researching everything that's out there. And I just, I've never asked, his name is Dr. Milano. I've never asked him if he purposely pulled my file because he knew he could save my life. I like to think it was God intervening, but he saved my life. And I know that. And, that's part of why I do this work, because there's so many people like me that didn't have the opportunity to live. But it's education. It's, what I would tell when we started doing the campaigns, when my sorority sisters started everyone wanted to do it. They didn't know about the opportunity. That's how we frame it. It's an opportunity to be a real superhero and save someone's life. And we just need to get that message out. One of the things that we do at the University of Washington is I partner with us. He's a lot younger than me, but he's not a student anymore. He graduated, but he donated. And he talks about the experience and what that felt like, that he took they have to do shots to up their white blood count, I think, or something. I'm not medical. But he went to a Mariners game the last night, and so, I mean, he wasn't feeling bad at all. And he said he had a whole pizza to himself. So he talks about the experience and it demystifies it. And I know there are two ways. He did the one through the apheresis or whatever. Again, I'll let Dr.
PBSC. Yeah, that's the stem cell. Yeah.
The bone marrow, but even I can at least, those of us on the call that have had bone marrow biopsies. I mean, this is another issue, is my first bone marrow biopsy was actually without any pain medication. And I do think that was related to being a Black woman. He was like, oh, there was a mishap. They were going to give me Oxycontin and codeine, and I'm allergic to that. So he was like, you can do it. You'll be fine. And because of timing, I wanted to get it done. And so I did it. But so I did it without drugs, and donors get good drugs. Right. So just sort of really explaining that it's not going to be a bad process either way, if you have to do it through the back or through the blood, and having people who've gone through it explain that to people. So education, and it shouldn't be on us to do it.
I would like to add something from what Dorian, Dr. Harris, and Shakira had mentioned. Several things, actually. So it's very important. First, let me say, I had volunteered for the bone marrow registry through their affiliates here in Sacramento, California, giving writing op-ed pieces and things of that nature for 18 years, and also participating in bone marrow drives. And I noticed that many Blacks do not join based on a bone marrow drive. And I was told during these drives to always tell them everything. Try to scare them from joining the registry. And I just thought, why would we do that when we have this crucial need? And I thought, that was the wrong thing. But once I started my dissertation research study, and I found out that statistically that Blacks, they have the highest rate of what I called post-match attrition rates, which mean once they join and become a match, they no longer want to participate. And I think that's partially because they don't have all the information. If they knew all the information, then they wouldn't be on the registry anyway. And if you have quality people on the registry because they are fully aware, they know what it would mean if they become a match, then those post-match attrition rates would be much lower. And also, in my study, I had watched or observed 9 bone marrow drives, and only one Black person had joined. And it came out to being less than 1%. And the conclusion of my dissertation was I had developed a bone marrow educational symposium. And I didn't do it in a silo. I had a whole bunch of focus groups of Blacks between 18 and 60, the age in which you can join and donate, and ask them what type of knowledge, what information would you want to know in order for you to make an educated decision to join and donate if you become a match. And then we did that with motivation, like how can you overcome that lack of motivation because you think your material will be misappropriated. And I also did it with the cultural issues. That was the most difficult. What would it take for you to overcome your distrust of the medical community? So with all that information, I developed the Bone Marrow Educational Symposium, and I took it to an ethnic studies class. And after that class, and I had the registry, the affiliate there, after that class, 30% of them joined the registry. So it's all based on education, and you can't give that amount of education at a pass-through at a bone marrow drive. It's just not possible. Oh, and by the way, my first recipient had myeloid dysplastic syndrome as well. And my second had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. My first recipient died 3 weeks post transplantation. And my second one, she broke records, and I'm still waiting for her to sign that paperwork so we can meet. But that's all I have to say on that topic.
So one of the questions that has come up in different ways is, okay, let's say that we've aged out of the registry or we can't join the registry for some reason. What else can we do? And we've talked a lot about the need for education and the need to, really be out in the community, in our communities, talking about this and giving people the opportunity to learn about it. So, Shakir, do you mind sharing a little bit about the Atlanta project and what we're doing there, and maybe, how people can volunteer, host local drives, get connected in terms of just being able to raise awareness?
Sure. So in Atlanta, we have several different concepts and we're trying to work with different organizations. So we have a curriculum that we are getting into certain colleges. We are working with high schools, civic groups, churches. We're doing a lot of different things, different corporations, and we're focusing all of that on the African American community in Atlanta to build awareness and get more African Americans on the registry. I think for people who cannot be on the registry, like you said, or maybe they've aged out, or for whatever reason they, can't be on the registry, we definitely need volunteers. So not only can you talk to your peers about it and your family and your loved ones that could possibly be on the registry, but you can join and help. So you can go to bethematch.org and sign up to be a volunteer so that you can be made aware of any activities that are going on in the Atlanta area. This past weekend, we actually just had an event at a food truck park and it went over really well. It was a little rainy, but people still came out. It was nice. We got a few, kids, and that was great. But I think it would be helpful to have even more volunteers out there so that we can just reach more people. Right now, something that Be the Match is doing are drive-throughs. So because of COVID and social distancing and things, we can't really do live drives, like large live drives with us all talking and hanging out and all that stuff. So we're doing drive-throughs. So having a good amount of volunteers available there to help us in the parking lot when we're, explaining to people who want to donate or join on registry what to do, and making sure that they are there to help us make sure we can get the cars in and out in a timely manner is extremely, extremely helpful. Because say you want to be on the registry and you do decide to go to the drive-through, but you're sitting in your car for 20 minutes before you even get a kid or whatever, you're going to be like, oh, okay, let me just go do something else. So the more volunteers, the better. Like, time is something that is always needed in any type of organization. But I think it's particularly important here because we're fighting for patients who don't have a lot of time. And so we want to make sure that we're doing the best we can and utilizing our time in the best way for our patients, because at the end of the day, all we want to do is help save their lives.
Thank you so much for saying that. I totally agree. And as the account manager for the Southern California region, I can put my information in the chat. And if anybody is based in Los Angeles, then you can reach out to me directly. And even if not, I can certainly help to connect you to the right person if you'd like to volunteer your time. Something else that came up in the comments here is, what about approaching the Divine Nine Black Greek organizations? Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Shakira or Camille?
Oh, I guess I'll start. I recently was on a call with Dorian. Hi, Dorian. And I think a couple of, well, he's a part of Alpha Kappa Alpha, and they're currently trying to start up something. Did I say it right? No?
Alpha Phi Alpha.
Alpha Phi. I'm so sorry. So Alpha Phi Alpha is starting something. And then there's a few people, I believe that's within the Atlanta region, Mr. Todd Gunn, and then in the Houston region, Mr. Eric Bolton, who's also, they're both a part of Be the Match. They're trying to get Divine Nine people to, I guess, within each organization, within each Divine Nine organizations, to kind of go ahead and start doing awareness projects and things of that nature.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Camille said. So we did a Zoom call and there was actually a presentation done by Be the Match at the Louisiana District Convention for Alpha Phi Alpha. They're in the process of kickstarting a partnership with the Southwest region of Alpha Phi Alpha. I understand from being a part of the organization that everything is a process, but it's encouraging to know that the process has started. And so that's the biggest thing for me right now, and it's encouraging. But getting all organizations involved that'll be great, and that's the goal. But it's going to take time, especially when you move up the ladder and you're going from regionals to nationals. Everyone has their programs that they already have ties to in regards to their national programs, but it's doable. I'm a man of faith, and something's going to happen. We're not going to talk about time, but I'm optimistic, and time is on my side. It's on Camille's side. It's on all our sides. So right. It's going to work out for us. But the process has been started, and all we can do is continue to spread the word, continue to push people in leadership to push this up the ladder and get things rolling for us. And if I have to continue to speak, hey, give me a mic. I'm not the best speaker. I'm not the loudest voice, but I'll say what's needed in order to get people to register.
Dorian, my husband's Alpha and is connected in Washington. So if you want to do a talk here, we'll connect. Okay.
We got some amens in the chat here for you, Dorian. So everybody's with you on that.
I do want to quickly mention that I'm not a part of any Divine Nine organization, but I do know, and I'm 99% positive that we do have a partnership with Sigma Gamma Rho, their national chapter. And so they pledge a certain amount of kids and, do a certain number of events every year for Be the Match. So that is a partnership that Rod Gunn, Camille, you mentioned him, he is in Atlanta, but it's a partnership that he mentioned to me, and I got to meet a few of the sorority members when we did our kickoff here in Atlanta. So there are Divine Nine organizations that are committed to Be the Match and committed to what we're doing and our vision and our purpose. So I did want to say that we do have some connections, but I think it's great to hear, especially, from Dorian, but it's great to hear that we're doing more because I wasn't aware of that. So that's great.
Catching up on the chat here, I think we've addressed most of the questions that have come up. If I've missed something, please, by all means, resubmit it. One of the other things that we kind of wanted to touch on is, we talked about the need for education and some of the myths that are out there as far as, becoming a donor. And when we talk about that donor experience, there are two ways to donate, right? We can donate through PBSC or peripheral blood stem cells. Apheresis is what that's called, and it's like donating plasma. Dorian, you mentioned that. The other option is to donate marrow, which is extracted from your pelvis bone under general anesthesia. Both of them are outpatient procedures, right? But sometimes just saying all of that still doesn't really address the misconceptions, right? It's like a lot of the science of it and not really the experience of it or how you might feel going through it. So Dr. Gillespie, can you maybe share a little bit about, you've been through the process twice, what your experience of going through that journey as a donor was like?
Well, when I first joined the bone marrow registry, that was in 1994, and I knew nothing about the registry. But I didn't know anything about harvesting and how it's done or anything like that. I wasn't contacted until 2000 to say that I was a match with someone. And that person, that was early in their journey. So they still had to exhaust chemotherapy and radiation. So my actual donation wasn't until June 16th of 2001. And I did the surgical process. So it's a little more detailed than what Dorian was saying. So I was under anesthesia, and that process, and a lot of times too, for the people that aren't aware, the people that are on the call, you don't just say, hey, you're a match, get down to the hospital. It doesn't happen like that. It's a process. So you go through this long medical checkup. It's not a single event or anything like that. For females, you have to have a pregnancy test, and then closer to the actual donation, you have to have another pregnancy test. There's an X-ray. They X-ray your body. They take lots of blood and things of that nature. I have small veins, so usually they do the little baby butterfly on my veins, but you can't do that for apheresis. So for my second donation, when I did apheresis, I've done both processes. I was going to do it at Berkeley, and then Berkeley said we can't touch those veins. So I did it at Stanford Hospital, Cancer Hospital. But getting back to the surgical process. So what they do after you do all of these tests and things of that nature, because their concern isn't just for the recipient, it's also for the donor. So they're not going to just harvest your bone marrow and say, hey, we hope you recover, good luck. They really want to make sure you're okay. And for me, I've always been borderline anemic. And so my first donation, they had to halt the my harvesting because my anemia was below where it's supposed to be for them to be able to do it. So they sent me home with, I call it superhero iron pills. And so I had to take those for 2 weeks. And then and all this time too, as the donor, you don't know this person, but you're rooting for them. I mean, it's almost like you're a family member. And so, and I'm getting emotional already. And so, so after the 2 weeks, I did the surgical process. So what they do is they use these long needles and they aspirate it from your pelvic bone. So it's like 1 inch on both sides of your spinal cord. There's no risk there of your spinal cord there in the pelvic bone. And you're lying on your stomach and you are under anesthesia, so it doesn't hurt. There's no incisions or anything like that. So technically, if you consider incisions a surgical process, then it isn't. But they do enter into your body. And they can't take more than 5%. So it's not like you're going without when you're, come to. Your body regenerates it within 4 to 6 weeks. So it's not something like donating a liver or a kidney or anything like that. And for me, I wasn't sick while my body is trying to recoup this bone marrow. And that wasn't the case for both times. The second time I was called, it was 21 years after being on the registry. And that's another thing too, the age thing, because I know it costs $100 for people to join if they're over the age of 44. And prior to Dr. Mills, the previous CEO, it was free for Blacks because of the critical disparity that we have. And as soon as that $100 was introduced, a lot of people refused to join the registry. When you're at drives and you tell them, hey, it's $100 because you're 45 or over. And I think that's terrible because that's a whole demographic that we're losing, it's an age demographic. And they're still viable because when I got called the second time, I was over 44. And obviously my bone marrow was good because my second recipient lived. So I think that $100 need to be revisited, especially since it's such a critical need for Blacks to join the registry. So with the apheresis, a nurse would come to your home and, well, I was working from home. So the nurse would come to your home, your job, school, wherever it is, every day at the same time, and give you a shot of filgrastim. I always say it wrong. And that's so that you could produce extra stem cells and stuff. And that one I could do every month. Because not saying that the first process is so terrible, it's just that it's just so benign. You sit in the chair, they put a needle in one arm and they suck the blood out. Meantime, they had, for me at Stanford, you're in these luxury seats, like at the movie theater, and you have your own movie screen, and they had HBO and all of these different channels. And at that time, I was my first year of my doctorate degree, and I had already unplugged the television and unhooked it. And I'm not a techie, so I didn't know how to hook it back up anyway. But I had committed to not watching television for those years. And so I was excited to watch movies and stuff. And then the other arm, you have the other needle, and you're getting all your waste back. So for someone that's even borderline anemic, that's not even an issue then, because you're getting your blood back. There is no negative, waste or anything like that. And I got up and I walked out, and it was like, it was no soreness, because you do have tenderness when you have the surgical process or the bone marrow extraction process. And I didn't have that soreness at all. The next day I could go running and resume my regular life. I had nausea for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, but that was because they said don't eat, so that you don't have to go to the restroom during the 4 to 6 hours that you're sitting there. And so I was just hungry. So I ate, I was fine. But I mean, I would do it once a month if I was a match once a month, if it was apheresis.
It's interesting is doing these talks, I've been on different panels, and some of the programs would be the match focused on student athletes. And so we've had some football players that donate from across the nation. And I've heard them say on panels that even the aspiration from the back, that they're sore from after a game than they are from donating. And
yeah.
One young man said that, what he went through is nothing compared to, Camille, I don't know how many you've had, right? But like, you're right that, we are sick and we have been doing chemo and total body radiation, and then we go through that. So I think that's one thing, is that you're a superhero, you're saving someone's life, and what you're going through is not even close to the battle of the life that you're saving, which is amazing.
Yeah. And people, when they ask me, did I give it a second thought? My guy, the first person, he was 46 years old. And when I was growing up, after my parents divorced, it was just my dad and I. And I was such a daddy's girl. When he was 46, I was only 16 years old. If I had lost my dad, I would have been devastated. And that's how I thought of it when I was called. And I just thought I wouldn't want someone to lose their dad. And so it was, I never even thought a second time about it. And then as far as the second match, I was a military police person. I didn't know anything about the military, but anyway, I joined because I wanted to go to school and my parents couldn't send me to school. And the things that I had to do as an MP, and thinking, oh, I'm saving a life or something like that, it does not measure to when I got that phone call, that 3-week checkup, and they said she is breaking records. She was out of the hospital. She was considered cured. She had no signs of rejection. I cried. Because you really start rooting for this person. It's almost like it's a family member. And you just, you want them to be okay. Even if she hadn't signed the paperwork. It's been 5 years. December 1st was 5 years. And if she needed it again, I would do it again. I wouldn't, be upset because she didn't sign the paperwork. But it feels so awesome to know that you saved a life.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. And thank you to everyone who attended and participated and submitted their questions. We're just right around our time mark here. And so definitely want to be respectful of everyone's time. But again, just as someone who does this work every single day, I'm so inspired by hearing from all of you. And so thank you for taking the time to join us. And I'll just, give a couple of seconds if there's any last thoughts that you want to leave us with. We can just go around the panel here.
I have a quick one. As far as the age thing, I really, really like to stress, I'm not sure, Christine, where you are as far as who to talk to and things of that nature, to really reconsider that $100 for people over the age of 44 when they're joining, especially for the populations that have this huge health disparity when it comes to bone marrow match rates.
Yeah. Thank you for that feedback. Camille, Dorian, anything you'd like to say to anyone considering joining the registry?
I'll be just point blank and say do it. Listen, it's hard to describe to people how it feels to be in this situation. And you don't want to know how it feels to be in the situation. But to know that you're taking someone out of the situation, that should be reason enough for you to sign up. It's as simple as that. And if you have to second guess that, if you have to sit down and question, then don't do it. But do it knowing that you're going to give someone literally a second chance at life. Someone who hasn't started a family, they'll have an opportunity to start a family. Someone who hasn't embarked in their career, they'll have that opportunity. I just bought my first home. I don't know what's gonna happen to my house, but I ain't worrying about that because somebody's gonna save my life. So you just put things into perspective. Get out of your shoes, look at someone else, and just say, look, man, if I can do this, if it's a simple process, let me go ahead and do it, even if it's just soreness. I mean, that's a minor sacrifice.
I mean, he said he did so well. So Dr. Harris mentioned like how many bone marrow biopsies I've had. I think I'm at 7. I think I've had 7 bone marrow biopsies. I've also had a liver biopsy and a PICC line. So I've been going through this since I was 12, 13, like started puberty, skipped all of that because I had to like be in the hospital in and out. I'm currently 22, so I'm at that point in my life where I'm like, would love to travel, would love to experience the world, kind of get into my 20s. But I'm kind of restricted because of my diamond blackfin anemia. So for people that are listening to me and that have heard me before, I would just say like, kind of like Dorian mentioned, like if you could save a life and give that person a second chance at living, do it. I've listened to so many donor stories and I wish I could be a donor because the feeling that they have, like as a donor, they're saving someone's life and it's so fulfilling. And I wish I could have been in that position, but I'm kind of on the other side of that. I'm a recipient, so I need you guys to donate. So yeah, if you can save a life, if you have that in your heart to do it, do it. To all the panelists, thank you guys for speaking. I enjoy listening to everyone's stories. I'm just immensely encouraged about the faith and just keeping the faith and having great and grinding grace because that's all I could do.
Amen.
And I just add one more thing.
Yeah.
If you don't have a primary care physician and you don't do your annual checkups, please do it. I'm not saying that would have caught it for me, but you never know. And I know us as Black men, we struggle with that everywhere, from state to state, community to community. It doesn't matter. But get your annual checkups, get your blood tests done, and make sure that your body is in the best shape that it can physically be in.
Know your baseline. Know your baseline. I mean, I had to to qualify for the clinical trial, I had to be a certain weight range and couldn't be overweight. You need to be healthy to fight this if you get a diagnosis. I also say I believe in karma. And, we never know. We never know who the next diagnosis is going to be. And so why not get your butt on the registry and start promoting it so you have folks lined up. I mean, I'm not wishing this on anyone, but we never know who it's going to be and who it's going to touch. And folks don't get rallied until it's someone close to them. But you see our faces here and people who really need help. And so I just pray that, this is on your heart, that you're out there and now you'll be an advocate for Dorian, for Camille, and for yourself and your family, and for Miss Wesley's kids, that folks really hustle out there to try and save lives. And it's all about time. I mean, none of us with the transplant know what the outcome's going to be, but my babies are now 10 and 13. I was able to spend time with my father before he passed last year. Like that matters. Even if I pass next year, God forbid, that time meant so much. And I'm so thankful to that little baby that their parents that gave her cord blood. That's another thing we didn't talk about is cord blood donation. And that's when you give, if someone's giving birth, hopefully your university, your hospital has a program to collect the cord blood. Otherwise it's gonna be thrown away. Right? So that cord blood saved my life. So please also think about donating cord blood and promoting those programs.
I thank you guys again so much. I'm going to turn it back over to Corey here so he can wrap us up.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to launch a quick poll. So if you would like to please take this poll, just a few questions about your experience with our event. Thank you again so much to all of our panelists, Dr. Harris for telling us your story at the beginning, and Christine and everybody at Be the Match. We dropped some other resources and links in the chat. Feel free to download the chat if you'd like, and definitely take a look at the registry and sign up if you can.